So we have our lining panel with our card slots and our ID slot. We have our exterior panel with our zipper pocket. And we're going to join these two panels together. Now what I will say is that I've actually got this orientated the wrong way around, because I want my ID slot and my zipper pocket to be at the same end. So when I put them together, and that's how I'm going to do it, that the ID slot is at the end where this pocket is, because that gives us less bulk when we sew. So I'm just going to put them together, and I'm going to start by matching up these bottom curves. Now this is where, if you wanted to, you could add a little bit of glue between the lining and the exterior panel. I like to live life right on the edge, and I don't add glue. I find that I just get messy if I put glue in. So I'm just going to carry on round. I'm going to take some of these clips off and replace them so that they're actually holding both the lining and the exterior. I'm trying to make sure that all those edges match perfectly. Now you may find that you have a few bits where it's slightly off, and that just depends on how accurately you've cut. And you can kind of go back and trim off a tiny bit at the end if you need to, if you've got a bit that's sticking out that just shouldn't be. It's not really that awful if you've just got a slither. I wouldn't expect there to be more than just a slither, to be honest, if you've cut accurately. And this is about accurate cutting. There we go. So now my two panels are sitting together. Let me just get that one right. That's not quite right. And sometimes you do have to kind of keep going back to it and make sure that it's as it should be. When you look at it from the exterior, you shouldn't see any of the lining. When you look at it from the lining, you shouldn't see any of the exterior. And that should be as it is. Now, the one thing I like to use is an awl. It helps me to hold all the layers together as I'm sewing. I have replaced my needle. I have a size 16 needle in here now. It's not a new one though, so I couldn't find another size 16 needle. I'm not sure what I've done with my needles. So I'm hoping that will be all right. And I'm going to start probably on the thinnest part, so sort of in the centre here on the side. And I'm going to top stitch around the outside using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now, because we have got nowhere to bury our threads, I am going to do one back stitch at the beginning and the end of my stitching. So I'm dropping my needle in, and I'm very slowly and carefully now. When I top stitch normally, I would usually use a sort of a stitch length of 4. I'm actually using a stitch length of just over 3 for this, because this top stitching is not just top stitching, it's actually constructional. So I need the stitches to be relatively close together. Now this awl I'm using to kind of hold the pieces in place, particularly these little tabs on the side of the card slots. I don't want those to move as I stitch over them. And sometimes, even though I'm using a Teflon foot, things kind of grab and you find that bits move as you stitch them, and that's something you don't want to happen. So I just use my awl to kind of hold the faux leather in front of the foot together and in place as I'm stitching. So I've literally just got it positioned just in front of where my foot is. It's like a spare finger almost. As you come around the curve, be very careful, go nice and slowly. You don't want to make that curve look anything but perfect, really. That's another good reason why we also reduce the length of the stitch, because that means that when we do top stitch around those curves, our stitching stays curved rather than looking like a series of little straight lines that have kind of gone jagged. Sorry, I've gone quiet because I'm concentrating. There's nowhere to hide this top stitching, so you really want to make it as good as you possibly can. So do it slowly, you know. Now, just before I get down to this end, I'm just going to make sure that my zipper pull is in the centre of my pocket. You don't want the zipper pull getting in the way as you stitch past it. It does tend to knock your stitching out of kilter. So just make sure that the zipper pull is pushed out of the way. So it's sort of centrally on the zipper pocket. And I always stitch from the lining side. So what you need to make sure is that the thread in your bobbin is the colour that you want to see on the outside of your wallet. Now at this end you will be going through 4 layers of faux leather, so this is like a 4-fold strap, so that's why we have a bigger needle. Again, just going around these curves nice and slowly. Using my awl to kind of as you're coming around this ID pocket now, this will secure the clear vinyl from the other sides. You secured the top edge with your top stitching, but you didn't secure the other 3 sides. You just glued it a little bit, and the glue will work as a sort of a temporary fix, but it won't work as a permanent fix. So this bit of stitching will just hold it in place. So take it slowly. It really is, I can't say it often enough, you don't need to rush this. Rushing it will give you a really poor result. There's nowhere to hide your top stitching with this, so if you're going to top stitch, you want it to be as perfect as you can possibly make it. And I know top stitching at 1/8 of an inch isn't for everybody. It's a bit hairy. Let's just trim off my, if you have any tiny, I've a tiny little slither there that I think literally was just a tiny slither, just a tiny little bit that just felt like it was, I like to feel around the edges to make sure there's no lumps. You can see the edges there are all fairly nice and lined up together, and that's about accurate cutting. So what you need to do now is fold your wallet in half, and you have to pop a couple of bulldog clips or something like that. Let me just pop a bulldog clip and show you. Put it on that fold overnight, which will hold the wallet nice and flat. Or you can put it underneath a weight, which will hold the wallet nice and flat. You may want to do some edge finishing. I'll pop a video onto the pattern with how you do this. It takes a long time to do, so I'm not going to sit here and show you every bit of it, but you've got, let me show you some tools. There's a couple of sort of edge finishing tools, and these little end bits, they kind of, you dip them into the finish and they will hold on to the finish, and they rotate, so when you roll it along the side it will give off an even amount of whatever you're putting on, whether that's foundation or leather edge paint. This one is a slightly different shape, it's just more triangular. This one also has a small palette, which sometimes is useful if you've got little bits that have kind of gone over the edge. But they're all much of a muchness. Now I'm in the UK and I use Identity Store foundation and edge paint. I know a lot of the ladies in the USA like the Gardini, and it's excellent, but it's in Italy, so it takes a little while to get here to the UK, and it's also quite expensive. I have also used, and with great success, the Cheap and Cheerful ones from eBay. I think these cost a couple of pounds, it has to be said. I use them with a decent foundation, and I found them without not to have any bothers, so not to have any major problems. So you can use those things if you wanted to edge, or you could use Sharpie pens if you wanted to run a Sharpie pen along the edge. I know people that have used acrylic paint and Mod Podge and various other different things as edge cover. I've not used those, so I can't guarantee that they would work. Sharpie pens work, edge paint works, but if you wanted to finish it off with edge paint, then you can do. It's pretty much good to go as it is. So it's a really cute, cool little wallet.